Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Okay, so I guess it's no longer a conspiracy theory, right? Remember Donald Trump used to point the finger at the fake news media and say they're fake news?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
They're working for the Democrats, and all the big corporate executives and talking heads would raise their hands in shock and say, who, us? No, we would never. That's a conspiracy theory. Just as Mark Zuckerberg and the rest of those social media execs went and testified in front of Congress claiming, no, we have no political bias on our platform. Of course not. We're not the arbiters of truth. Anybody who suggests otherwise is peddling in conspiracy theory, right? Yeah, well, I guess it's no longer a conspiracy theory anymore. No, it's upgraded to now full-on conspiracy, because we now have the hard evidence that the so-called free press in America is nothing more than a government-funded propaganda machine working directly for the Democratic Party and the deep state. And of course, you probably know the outlet we're talking about today. We're talking about Politico, the same news outlet that spent years carrying water for Joe Biden and pushing every fake Trump scandal, not to mention covering up Democrat corruption, just as the Hunter Biden laptop story. Well, it turns out after Elon Musk's preliminary audit of U.S. aid that supposedly Politico received over $8 million in government funds in the fiscal year of 2024 alone. Holy freaking moly. I mean, no wonder the news is so slanted. Seems like we truly have a systemic pay-to-play scheme where these outlets get taxpayer dollars, and in return, well, the proof's in the pudding now, isn't it? Let's get into this. Boy, do we have a scandal to cover today. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Okay, so here's the headline that's making all kinds of noise. The White House confirms that Politico received $8 million of U.S. aid funds. Doge will cancel those payments. I actually have to enter a little bit of a fact check here, because I think most of the funds that are headed towards Politico are actually not coming from U.S. aid, but rather it's split throughout all kinds of different agencies. If we go to usaspending.gov, we could actually get a more accurate breakdown into where the money's coming from. It's coming from various different sources, such as the Government Accountability Office, the Department of State, Department of Defense. But anyways, nonetheless, according to the White House, Politico received $8 million taxpayer dollars in just the fiscal year 2024 alone.
So upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than $8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The Doge team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that we are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that effort.
$8 million taxpayer dollars to Politico, a news outlet that's supposed to be neutral. Seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest, right? Seems problematic? Yeah, of course it is. And it certainly explains a lot now, doesn't it? We've seen the bias reporting, all the partisan takes and hoaxes from legacy media outlets. Well, this right here might be the explanation. It could have all been a very orchestrated, state-funded propaganda machine designed to manipulate public perception and keep Democrats or big government, deep statist types in power. I mean, what other explanation could you possibly have? Why are taxpayer dollars going to a news outlet? In no universe should that ever be tolerated. Is that ever acceptable? Mostly because of the obvious conflict of interest. You can't have a free press if the press is dependent on collecting taxpayer dollar monies from government agencies. At that point, it's not the free press. You're not an independent outlet. You're state media. What else could possibly explain this $8 million cash injection? And well, I guess we may as well address the current justification that we're seeing from the left and, of course, Politico. They responded to this bombshell scandal. Note to our readers, Politico has been the subject of debate on X this week. Some of it has been misinformed, and some of it has been flat out false. Let's set the record straight. So I guess we're all just misinformed and pushing fake news, right? Let's see if that statement holds up. Politico is a privately owned company. We have never received any government funding, no subsidies, no grants, no handouts, not one dime ever in 18 years. Millions of people around the world read our journalism on Politico.com and Politico.eu, and in newsletters like this one, it is supported by advertising and sponsorships. Politico Pro is different. It is a professional subscription service used by companies, organizations, and yes, some government agencies. They subscribe because it makes them better at their jobs, helping them track policy, legislation, and regulation in real time with news, intelligence, and a suite of data products. At its core, Politico Pro is about transparency and accountability, shining a light on the work of agencies and regulators and policymakers throughout our vast federal government. Businesses and entities within the government find it useful as they navigate the chaotic regulatory and legislative landscape. It's that simple. And so basically what they're telling us, what the excuse is, frankly, if you ask me, is that there's nothing to see here. It's just a regular government contract, and they're not overpaying for these subscriptions because they're paying for Politico Pro, which I think I've seen quoted at like $8,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think that's a solid defense at all. If anything, it seems like a front. What they're saying is that the government purchased last year over 800 Politico Pro licenses at $10,000 each, and that's somehow justified? The government somehow can't function without $10,000 Politico subscriptions? That's completely absurd. And again, the conflict of interest remains, because you've got this news agency that's collecting $8 million in taxpayer revenues. In other words, we have a major news organization that's dependent on and wants to protect an $8 million contract that they have with the government. And that creates what exactly? Ding, 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 leverage. You got the State Department, the Department of Defense, and the Government Accountability Office, as well as other departments, who now hold significant leverage over Politico. They're using taxpayer dollars to subsidize this outlet, and they could, of course, flex those contracts to get Politico to act in line, let's say. That conflict of interest alone totally discredits Politico as an organization. I don't care what anybody says. Frankly, any news organization that accepts any monies from the government simply cannot be trusted to report the news accurately. You know, they might think that this is a solid defense, but again, I just view it as a front. There's nothing acceptable about these payments. The government doesn't need 820 Politico Pro subscriptions. It's way too lucrative of a contract. It's wasteful spending that opens the door for total corruption. After witnessing everything we've witnessed, I mean, is it really any surprise that people would view these payments as payoffs or inappropriate or unacceptable? I mean, come on. Like I said earlier, at least in my view, there's never a justification for taxpayer dollars or big government money being given to any news outlet, period. Because it creates a dependency, which then creates a huge conflict of interest, and that's obviously antithetical to the idea of a free and fair press. I tried to be as fair as possible with this one because I know a lot of people are kind of misrepresenting some of the facts here, which is giving the left the ability to come in and attempt to debunk. But the leftist debunking doesn't hold up, at least in my view. At the end of the day, it's still the same damn thing. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.